The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome. You have joined the EU SME Centre webinar series, and today we'll be looking at managing customs and labelling for food and beverage imports to China. My name is Anne Maddy, and I am the Communications Manager at the EU SME Centre. So, before we get started, I just want to run through some simple steps for you. In your control panels, you will see that you have a little hand icon, and I ask that those of you listening in, if you could raise your hand, and that way we can see that you can hear us clearly today. Okay, so I can see that there's many people joining us, so we're great. It's great to have you here today. You'll also be able to interact with us during the webinar today. So in your control panel, there's a questions panel. There we encourage you to send through your questions as we go along, and we'll do our best to answer these questions during the webinar and mostly towards the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. So, as a mini recap for those of you who already know the EU SME Centre, but also as a brief introduction to all you newcomers today, I just want to take a couple of moments to introduce to you the EU SME Centre. So the EU SME Centre is a project funded by the European Union, and we are established here in Beijing to support small and medium enterprises from Europe to export and invest in China. We have many tools, business tools available for SMEs to help you get ready. And so if you have any inquiries, if you would like to have a consultation with one of our in-house experts, we can provide you with some free and confidential advice. From our Knowledge Centre on our website, you can get a lot of market information. And then we have a series of online and offline trainings and seminars. So I really recommend that you visit our website regularly and stay up to date with the latest tools that we have. So today, to the subject at hand, how to manage customs and labelling for food and beverage imports to China. Well, this is a very hot topic, and we can see that from the number of attendees we have today. China is, of course, one of the largest consumers of food and beverage products in the world. It is also one of the largest producers, and according to recent studies, the grocery retail sector in China is set to grow to an astonishing value of $1,582 billion by 2016. Now, the EU SME Centre receives many inquiries from producers and exporters of food and beverage products, and so today this is the sector that we will focus on, specifically how to get your goods through Chinese customs. So today you will learn about Chinese standards, labelling requirements and regulations, and also some tips and best practices to help smooth this process. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to our expert speaker of today, Pablo Recio.
Good morning for everyone who is in Europe, and good afternoon for us here in Asia. I've been in China and worked in China for 8 years now, since 2005, and most of this time I've been dedicated to foodstuffs, mostly to help companies, European companies, to get into the Chinese market. We've seen how the market has developed. We've seen the difficulties it has, but we've seen also the great potential that has become a reality. My company, Gold Millennium, has exactly the same experience, even more, and from our offices in China, we've helped a number of companies to get into the Chinese market. Now, first, I would like to explain what we're going to see today. The first thing that we would like to see today is, can I export anything to China? The first question that we should ask ourselves is not how, is if I can, okay? That is the first thing we will see. Then we will see the role of Chinese standards. The idea here is, if I can export, how do I understand what I have to do, okay? And not just finding the right standard, not just knowing what my standard, but finding the right information, so I get to have details on that. Now, after that, we're going to check knowing the standards, how do I have to do all the process? So my product goes into China, which is not always easy, with the less possible problems or without any problem at all, okay? And where are these laws or these regulation coming from, so I can understand it better? Now, finally, and very, very important, we're going to check what is common practice. What is the regulation, the application of these regulations, because there are some differences that we really need to know when dealing with China, okay? So, before we start, and just to see our audience and what interests you, we're going to launch a poll, which is, what products do you want to export to China? We can only choose 5 categories: wine, meat, fish, dairy, or any other that includes pastry, chocolates, or edible oils, to try to adapt our presentation to the audience that we have today, okay? We can see you're voting very actively, so we're going to leave the poll open for a few more seconds. Please do choose, so we can close the poll in a few seconds. All right? Yeah. Okay, so we have a lot of people coming from other products, that is pastry, processed canned food, or edible. And then equally people or companies from wine, spirits, meat, and dairy. No one from fish or seafood. The presentation will be adapted to that. And you will be finding all the information you require, okay? We're going to take 30 minutes to go through this presentation. It is more than enough to give you a very clear idea of the main things that you have to take into consideration. Now, we can see that what you've chosen is very much what by we means the European Union, exported last year. Wine and spirits were 13%, and it's been 17% of yours, but if we include liquors, it's about the same. The meat was not that much, but it's growing a lot, and that is why there is many companies today on with us trying to export, and then we have a little bit of everything else, okay? So you have the statistics there. This is what the European Union is exporting. Pork meat is probably what is growing the most in that market share. What is the path to export to China? Check this slide as any slide that you could use for any product, not just foodstuffs, okay? You are the producer in Europe. You want to get into China, and first you need to understand that there is a legal requirement to see if you can export or not. And the next step to get into detail is what certification or mandatory marking I have to put. And then once inside the country, you understand that there is technical requirements for the product. Exported, imported, or nationally produced, doesn't matter. And that you will have to do some conformity assessment, or you may go through a testing and even through a commodity or product inspection, okay? Now, let's get to start. So you're there sitting in your office at this moment, and you want to see if you can export. You have to understand that China has 3 categories into exporting products. Allowed, that is, for example, wine or edible oils or chocolates. You're just allowed. Doesn't mean that you don't have to comply with things, but initially you're totally okay. We also have restricted products. It may surprise you, but you cannot freely export rice to China. You need a special license, and the importers need a special license. And you also have prohibited products, like poison or drugs that you cannot get into the country, okay? So the first idea is even if the product is allowed or restricted, do not assume that your country can export this product. So, for example, 17% of yourselves indicated that you want to export meat. Well, understand that only if your country has signed a bilateral protocol and you have been checked by the Chinese authorities, you are able to export meat. Otherwise, you will not be able. So when you check all the details and information and requirements, the first requirement is, are those requirements good for me? Are they applicable for me? Okay? Or they are not. For example, if you export meat, livestock, or fruit, you need this protocol between your country and China. It's all right. And if you export wine or olive oil, you do not need this requirement. Okay? Let's see what I mean by this requirement. I mean a protocol. Some products do need a protocol. The protocol is an agreement between our country and China to be able to export the product. We will see later on how this is signed country by country and not by the European Union as a whole market, okay? We will provide a list of updated protocol signs at the moment during this presentation. The protocol will also indicate one document that is very important, which is the export certificate, which is the document that you will have to fulfill on top of all the other conditions that you will be needed. So first idea, important in this presentation, I cannot export anything just because I found the list of requisites. I have to check first if I can export it from my country, okay? What is the list of products that I can export? Well, on your left side, on the screen, you can see, according to Chinese institutions, as of today, the list of published agreements that they've been signed. So, for example, if you are from Finland, you know that you can export aquatic products, but not fruit, horses, pork, or chicken, for example. If you are from the Netherlands, you know that you can export pork, aquatic products, and live horses. You have the list there. If your country is not included, the Chinese authorities have not published you the possibility of exporting. It's either a matter of time or it's either your country to close negotiations with China. On your right side, you have the sources of information. There are Chinese institutions. Unfortunately, most of it is in Chinese. So if you require information, you will have to ask European institutes or organizations based in China, like the EU SME, so they can tell you whether you can export or you don't, or your own embassy trade section. Sorry. Now, so we can export the country. We've checked, we can export the product from my country to China. What do I need? Well, the first thing you need as an exporter is an export license or an export registration code, okay? So you have to go through a process which is done online very easily. So you are a registered exporter in China. Now, all the instructions are in Chinese, but many countries do provide a manual in which they tells you where to click and what to write, and you're totally perfectly fine to do it in less than 5 minutes. Again, the European Union SME can help you if you need any help during this process. It's really very simple, but you really have to go through it. If you have the exporter's license, you need to import the product, and for this you will need to be an importer or to have an importer, because they will have an import license, okay? The importer do need an import license in order to import the products. And foodstuffs is a special import license. It's not the common import-export license. It's foodstuffs import-export license. Same as for alcohol, there is a specific one, okay? You will be required to have the right documentation as Chinese customs. We will see later how you can get all this information at Market Access Database, European Union website, to check of all these. Be careful. That website indicates what are the requisites, does not tell you whether your country can export or not. So you have to check that in advance, okay? And these are the documents you will be normally needing. Now, so the export requirements, you will check at Market Access Database, clicking the link and going to Exporter's Guide to Import Formalities. And the import requirements means that you need an import license, okay? The import license you don't need to have, the importer must have the import license. How is this normally done? Well, you either establish your own company in China and you have your import-export license. This is good for all those of you who are going to come to China strong and for the long term. But to start for exporting, maybe this is not what you would like, so you will go to the second option. You use a trading company. Companies specialize on doing this specific task. Or you actually work with your importer and you do get them to do all the import process, okay? Now, at this point, we're going to launch a poll, see how are we understanding this situation.
Okay, so it's Pablo, a very interesting introduction there, and we will launch a poll now just to recap a little bit this important point. So as an exporter, how do I comply with export requisites and duties in China? So by carefully checking at Chinese customs and AQ/SIQ, or in fact it is the importer's responsibility, so the exporter does not have to comply with them. To export, we need a Chinese import-export license, or if we do not have an import-export license, we can use an agent to import the goods. So I just leave you with a moment to finish your voting. Okay, thank you for voting there. So here I share the results with you so we can see how everybody has answered.
Okay, so what we can see here is a lot of different answers here, and this is quite common. We see a lot of this when we are dealing with the companies, which is, where do I get the information first? All right. Most of the things you've said is true. I mean, if we don't have an import-export license, we can use somebody else. But being true doesn't mean it's accurate. To export, we will just have to focus on our side. The import goes for the importer, all right? So the best idea that we can do here is, in my opinion, is you will have to go and check with the institutes that are there available before trying to check directly at Chinese customs or AQ/SIQ. This you can do, but unless you speak Chinese, it's going to be almost impossible. So I know the question is a bit tricky, but this is because the market here is a bit tricky. So the Chinese sources of information you have to check, but do not rely fully on them unless you speak Chinese, okay? It is the importer's responsibility to manage all the import process. This is true. Only you will have to do your part as an exporter, and truly you will have to help them a lot, okay? Otherwise, the problems will show up in customs. Okay, to export to China, we don't need an import-export license. The import-export license is for the importer or for the Chinese exporter, but we don't need it. Even an individual may be able to export. All right, very good there. It is very clear. It is very clear that the situation is unclear, I have to say, and this is what we find every day. All right, find every day that is complicated. The institutions like the USME has established strongly in China because of these issues, because it is way more complicated than it seems. So I suggest that you go with professionals. You go with professionals always, and it is better than try to get the information yourself, or do both things, but do not rely only on try to get it in English on the website, okay? Now, two ideas that we have seen so far. Can I export my product? That was the first idea. The second idea, if I can, I need the export license myself, and whoever is importing needs an import license. Those are the two main ideas we've seen so far. Once we get to customs, unfortunately, we have to pay tariffs and taxes, and maybe you will have to pay a consumption tax. It's a luxury tax if you want. Many products have it, others don't, but it will be also something that will affect your price. Now, for example, in wine, as you can see, your price will be at least 50% higher just because of the tariff, VAT, and consumption tax. And your price from your home country to China will multiply by 2 or 2.5 times. I know this may seem, or 3 times even. This may seem excessive, but this is common practice. I don't want to get too much into distribution and commercial issues, but you're not going to see it cheaper, and you're not going to convince the distributors to sell it cheaper, okay? Now, just for your reference, because you will be able to track this presentation afterwards online, if you want to have some idea of who is providing the information and how to access it, here you have the main Chinese agencies involved. China Customs, AQSAQ, please remember this one is the General Administration of Quality Supervision, Inspection and Quarantine, is the institution that you will have to pay more attention, even more than customs, okay? The China Inspection and Quarantine is the local branch of the previous one, and then for some industry and commerce standards, we have ICEX, and we also have for the standards the CNCA. Okay. So customs and AQSIQ are the ones we will remember, and we will come back to this presentation if we need more information. So the third idea that we're going to introduce is if I can export my product, if I have the exporter's code already, if I have an importer, then how do I understand how my product works? And this is through the standards. The standards establish how my product works in China, okay? So it's a standard. The idea is exactly the same as it is in Europe. It will explain how do we regulate the product and how do we define the product. Now, only for your reference, please understand that there is 4 levels of standards in China: national, professional, local, and enterprise. The standards may be compulsory or mandatory, but they can also be voluntary, all right? Now, the ones that will worry us the most, of course, is the voluntary, is the compulsory, and most of them will come on the national level, especially for foodstuffs. For other sectors, it may change, but especially for foodstuffs. Also some professional at detail level. Now, to look for standards and for you not to get lost when you're checking standards, understand that you will be finding the standards as a code, starting by GB and then a large number. So when you see wine, GB, and a large number, this is what you're looking for as a national standard. And this is what you will be normally looking for, all right? If it is followed by a /T, is voluntary, /Z is a national guiding technical document. Do not worry, just GB and the number is what you're looking for. On professional standards, you have the list there. We're not going to get into details. Not so many for foodstuffs, so that is why we're not going to put too much time into learning about them today.
Okay, thank you, Pablo. Actually, standards is one of the departments that we have, one of the teams that we have in-house here at the EU SME Centre. So if you do have any follow-up questions relating to standards, we get a lot of inquiries asking about the specific Chinese standards that relate to different food and beverage products, then I encourage you to ask the expert through our website at www.eusmecentre.org.cn. So I just take a moment to launch our third poll of today. So when you're actually looking into standards for your products, specifically to import your products into China, which of the following is most accurate? So to understand the regulations for your products, which of the following is most accurate? Only one standard is valid, or if one standard is valid, if more than one standard is available, the higher level will apply, or more than one standard may complement my product regulation, or all standards are compulsory. So I give you a couple more seconds to vote on that. You've been very active today. So I will close the poll now and share with you the results. So we can see that by far the majority of you are saying that more than one standard may complement my product regulation. So I'll hand over back to Pablo now to say a few more things on standards.
All right, so great job, everyone. That is exactly correct. More than one standard may complement my product regulation, okay? That is true. I'm not saying the previous one is incorrect. If more than one standard is available, if they get into conflict, the one with the higher rank will prevail. But the main idea here is remember that maybe for your product, you need to check more than one standard. We're going to see an example in a minute, okay? As if all standards are compulsory, truth is not. There is voluntary standards as well. But the ones you will be finding for foodstuffs will be most of them compulsory, all right? So great job there. We've received through the website a few questions, and we would like to take a minute to provide you with some feedback on them, okay? For example, one question related to what we've seen before is, what about cheap products, obviously referring to those products that I mentioned before that you need to export from your country. I cannot be fully sure the country of the person who made the question, but we will have to go back to the slide that we've shown before, and most likely very few countries can export this product. So for sheep products, I mean, well, if it is the wool is fine, but as long as it is the livestock, we are not able to export it from most of the countries in Europe. Please send the question indicating what is your country, and at the end of the seminar or later on this week, we will provide you with a full answer, all right? That was one question. Thank you so much for making this interactive. More questions. How the China custom works in this situation? Is there any kind of food restriction from the European Union? I guess we're referring to the same issue. Well, yes, there is these restrictions that we've mentioned before. If you're talking about meat, livestock, fruit, or vegetables, you need to make sure your country has closed an agreement. For any other product, please contact the EU SME Center, and we will, or they will give you an answer, okay? We cannot go product by product. It will take an awful amount of time. But it's very easy. It's very easy to know if your product is approved. Just send the question with the specific product. There is a third question that I'm going to leave for the end because I've prepared the presentation to get into this subject at the very end. So getting back to standards, you've seen what is most important, the national standards and the professional standards. For foodstuffs, only know that there is local standards and enterprise standards, and that they will not affect you all that much for foodstuffs, so I wouldn't worry, just know they exist, okay? There is institutes here that provide the standards and publish them. You will have this slide as your reference. Again, it's exactly the same idea as we've seen before. Now, let's go through this one more time. First issue, can I export my product? Second issue, export number. Third, an importer. Fourth, know my standard, okay? It's quite simple. Information to check where I can get the standards is the one you can see on the websites, but unfortunately most of them are just in Chinese. So do get help from institutions and organizations based in China. What is going to take you an awful amount of time will take them only minutes. Labeling. This is the next main point that we're going to see. Labeling requirements is not super complicated. We have one question already regarding labeling. It's not super complicated, but it's constantly and ever-changing. And if you know what you're doing, you're fine. And if you don't, you can have a lot of problems. Truth is, labeling requirements have changed a lot in the last few years. It is very easy not to be updated. And I cannot say, unfortunately, that it's very clear what you have to do not to have any problem. You may get rejected for one reason, and you can go again, and you may get rejected for a different reason. It's okay. You will make it at the end on the third attempt. Only it takes time and money. So be very careful, and we will try to avoid this situation, okay? So the labeling is something that we will have to get before our product gets to China. We have to submit a sample of our label, and if it's approved, we're fine. And if not, you need to change. But you have to pay for every single label that you try to pass through customs. So be careful that you understand your requisites, okay? Again, first time you're doing it and second time you're doing it, a lot of institutions here to help you with a lot of experience. Why not using them? Truly is, you shouldn't have any problem, but the practice is that we do. I've had a lot of companies with a lot of experience going through the label issue twice or three times just for not being careful. It is true that sometimes you have to be extremely careful. Once you know what you're doing, you're fine. So labels as standards may come in different levels. So for example, the general label is one standard, and that goes for foodstuffs in general. But then there is some more detail for alcoholic drinks, and one more detail for wines. So this main idea that I want to explain is very careful with the labeling, changes constantly, situation is not always clear. Get support from the institutions on the ground. They put a lot of people and attention to this to get help, and understand that same as your product is defined by different standards, your labels are defined by different standards, okay? We just put a sample there of what a wine label could look like, and everything that you need to put there. Even the size of the characters, of the Chinese characters, have to go under certain rules. Now, truly get help the first time and the second and the third, and you'll be fine afterwards, all right? There is some practices here that you will have to understand about the time for consumption and the expiration date, and these the expert can explain you the first time very easily, all right? Okay, so labeling was the other main idea. Remember, you have to pre-approve it. Your product will not go in until your label is being approved. You can submit the labels beforehand. You don't have to wait for your product to be already in the port in China. You can do it before, okay? Also, remember, this changes a lot, so keep constantly updated for the labeling issue. And one more issue that we want to see, the differences between products and sectors. All foodstuffs are equally easy to import? Not at all. Not at all, absolutely. Most of you have indicated other products, so you could be doing sweets, pastries on olive oil, very commonly. If you're doing that, then you don't need a protocol, and your expert would be relatively easy. Only remember the labeling and the additives. There is a legislation for additives. If you're doing olive oil, you're fine, but if you're doing sweets with some colorings, you have to check it, okay? Remember, additives and label for, let's say, those products. If you're doing liquor, you're also fine. No need for a protocol. But if you're doing, for example, meat, it's very complicated. 17% of your sales today want to deal with some kind of meat. Now, your country needs a protocol, and you need to be visited by the Chinese institutions, okay? This is something that your country has to do, and probably is already in the process of doing it, and it's not automatic. It's company per company, all right? If you want more information, we're here to explain you. The most complicated of all is the livestock, because you not just need the protocol, but you need a quarantine for the animal, which makes it super complicated. In the middle, you have other products like fish on dairies that needs an agreement signed between the countries, but it sends automatically to every single company and is not too complicated to get into China. So remember also, not all foodstuffs has equal difficulty to get it into China. We will be very fine with someone's very safe. Others may be out of our hand if we're able to export them or we're not.
Thank you, Pablo. Actually, I wanted to come back to your slides on labeling. Specifically, you mentioned about the use of additives. I mean, what if I'm importing my wine into China? I have been importing for several months or years. It's working well. What if I add a new additive to that wine? What would happen then?
Yeah, very good question. If in your product you're changing something, it's like if from the customs point of view, it can be seen as a new product. We're going to get some tips and common practices later on, but the truth is, if you change something, you may have to go through the whole process again, okay? It doesn't mean it has to be as difficult as the first time, but you're submitting a new label. Remember that you have to submit a new label if you change the ingredients, okay? Wine may not be an issue, but if you're doing, for example, pastry, and you are adding some fat coming from animals, you also have to check, because maybe your country cannot export fat from those animals. So the thing is, it sounds very difficult. If you've done it for a little bit of time, it becomes natural, like everything else. That is why I'm insisting again. Do get help. There's a lot of institutions in China to help you.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I want to bring to your attention some useful documents that you can already find available free to download from the EU SME Centre website. And one of those is a guideline on the technical requirements for labelling, which covers specifically food and beverages. And you will see on the current slide that you have the link to that guideline. So if you have any further questions, you would like to read up a bit more on the technical requirements for labelling, you can look there. So I think it's time to ask you to be active again on your control panels, and we launched one of the last polls of today. So specifically looking now at getting my goods into China. So which of the following would you choose as a best practice? I mean, knowing the procedure does not guarantee a smooth process necessarily, so you leave some margin for error. Exceptions are frequent. Quantity imported and port of entry may affect the process. Updates are constantly needed, or is it all of the above? So hopefully you've been listening carefully to what Pablo has been saying, and I think that it will become fairly obvious the answer here. So I just give a couple more seconds for you to vote. And here I will share with you the results. So yes, you will see in a moment the results coming up. Over 70%, so 76% of you have suggested that all of the above are very important.
Okay, so great job again. In this question, necessarily all of you are right, because all of the above is the best answer that we can have. You're all right. Only all of you are right. Only the thing is that you need to keep in mind the three things, okay? Knowing the procedure does not guarantee it. We have a lot of clients, we work with them, and I cannot guarantee that you're going to go through customs clean, especially the first time. We're going to talk about this in a minute. Exceptions are frequent and updates are constantly needed. That's why it is easier to get with someone working on the ground. So all of the above was the best answer. All of them were right. Great job, everyone. We're going to start now the last part of the presentation before we get into the questions. We've received a few very interesting ones, which is some general remarks and also some common practice. Now, common practice is my favorite. General remarks, 3 ideas. You've made some questions about this during the presentation. The first time I export, or how do I start exporting, is essential. What you want to do is to have a clean record the first time. How do you do this, minimizing the risk? It is simple. It's simple to explain, at least. First, do not start with a big export amount. Keep it simple. Send some samples, but do not pass them like samples. If you want to send samples, you will put samples, no commercial value. You're not going to do this. You're just going to send 6 bottles just to make the process, and you're going to keep all your paperwork. And when you have all the papers, the second time is going to be much easier to get the product through customs. I know I'm talking about bottles because this is wine or liquor. Works exactly the same for everything else. Send a small amount first, a very small amount first. If it takes time to pass it through customs, not an issue for you. It's not a headache. You're not concerned. You can even try to do it by plane. If you already have a shipping on their way to China, send a few units by plane first. You will have 2-3 weeks to deal with the issue and get a successful paperwork record and be ready for the next time. You will learn, you will have something to show the next time, okay? So first time, very careful. And first time, ask for help once more. Please do ask for help. It saves you a lot of problems. So that was my second idea. Ask for help. I've said it 1,000 times, but I've been doing this job for 8 years for government agencies, for private consulting companies. It saves an awful amount of time and trouble just to do it right from the very beginning. If you're on the ground, it's easier. And language is one of the main barriers. You can overcome this difficulty in 2 ways. In-house language capabilities, or again, getting help for outside, okay? Because you will have to submit a lot of the information in Chinese. I have a question regarding this that I will answer later on. In Chinese, and you cannot use Google for that. The risk is too high. So you will have to go with someone who's done it before, okay? That was for the general remarks. Let's check my favorite, common practice. Because everything else, we could write the manual and it will be there for your review. But what happened in reality? Well, first, one thing that I have not mentioned before, but is essential, is to protect your trademark or IP.
Yes, intellectual property is a big issue for companies bringing their products into China, their products and services, and especially in food and beverage products. Actually, on this note, I wanted to jump in. Sorry to interrupt you there, Pablo, but for those of you who are not yet familiar with the China IPR SME Help Desk, they are also an EU-funded project specifically supporting small and medium businesses on issues relating to intellectual property in the Chinese market. So if you want to get some more information on how to protect your intellectual property, remember that you will need to file your trademarks in China, and that even if you have your trademark registered in your home country, that doesn't make it an automatic registration in China. So for more information on intellectual property, I welcome you to visit the China IPR SME Help Desk, and I will provide you with we will provide you with the contact details, the email, the web address later.
Okay, so remember this, please. IP protection, it does not cost all that much. Just because you're protected in your home country or in Europe or in most of the world, China requires a specific registration, okay? So make sure you have it. You start as soon as possible because the trademark principle here is first to file. The first one asking for the trademark is going to get it. Doesn't matter if your grandfather did create the company and the brand, if you've been using it worldwide, it's not going to be enough. So please be very careful with this, all right? Be very careful. Second idea, exceptions by the thousands. Doesn't matter how much I write in the manual, you will find so many exceptions to anything I could possibly say. So be ready, try not to go very short in time, save some time for possible problems. Understand that things may change a lot, for example, from port to port. It's not the same, one port one day, that a different port a different day. I know it doesn't sound like very standard, but this is the practice here in China. So this is why it's also very important that you work with an importer, reliable importer established in the market, because the truth is that they know their way around their port. Not every port, not every single port, but their port, they know very well. So for example, companies based in Beijing, they know their way around Tianjin port very well. If you take them to Shanghai, not so much, okay? So your importer will help you deciding what port you're sending the products, and believe me, in practice, there is a difference. Do a small scale test first. This is what I said before, worth it repeating. Do not send 4 containers the first time. They most likely will be stuck in port for some time. The first time we go through customs is a pain. That is the truth. In terms of paperwork, they may want to do tests to your products. This takes a little bit of time, but mostly takes, a little bit of money, but mostly takes time. So send a few products first, and then you send everything else, okay? It's going to save you a lot of headaches. Exporters' responsibilities. Your importer will tell you to declare a lower value to pay less tariffs. This is not what you should be doing. It saves a little bit of money in customs, yes, but you shouldn't be doing that. And when you see your price on the shop in China, you will ask yourselves where this 3 or 5% went to if my product has tripled from the product I have in my home country, okay? Next question, common practice. Where can I find all related information? Many sources in China, some of them in Chinese. What I can recommend is choose 1, 2, 3 institutions as your bridge to China. EU SME Center, certainly one of them. Your country will have a trade section. Your region may have a trade section. Chamber of Commerces. I would suggest that you deal with them. They're going to help you a lot, case by case, and there is a lot of support here in China. I believe the USME Center to be a very, very, very good example. Okay?
Thank you very much, Pablo. That leaves us actually with a very healthy 10 minutes for Q&A. Now, I've seen that we've got many, many questions coming through. So you've been very active today, and a lot of follow-up questions, some on standards, some on labeling, and some specifically on the customs procedure. So I would like to try and tackle as many of these questions and answer as many as we can still today. If for some reason, due to time, we do not answer your question today, please do visit the website or send us your inquiry through the email address on the slide that you can currently see. So Pablo, maybe the first question that we have, I think there's one relating back to customs.
Yeah, we had a question earlier in the webinar, exporting Italian wine to China. It doesn't matter what country it is. They are about to send their first container to Tianjin. very, very common, this situation. Is Tianjin a good port, or is it better to use a different one? It totally depends on your importer, okay? Tianjin is not a bad port at all. Shenzhen isn't either, but it totally depends on the person or company that is going to do all the imports. That is very important because they will know their way around and they will understand how their port works. Is it possible or recommended to send a few bottles first? Totally advise. But do not send them samples. You have to send them and do all the import process normally, okay? And for the translations, how can I get them right the first time? Again, do ask for help on the institutions on the ground. They can send you examples for you to follow, and you can get the standard where it will explain exactly what you need to put.
Yes, on that, Pablo, I know you mentioned that you should consult as much as possible organizations on the ground. There are, of course, many organizations here, the EU SME Center, the China IPR SME Help Desk. There are, of course, the chambers of commerce. Your country may have a chamber of commerce on the ground here. From the EU SME Center website, in our Knowledge Center, you will see that we have an online database called the Service Providers Database. Now, that is a directory of more tailored organizations and companies working on the ground in China to support in different ways. So do have a little look through the directory if you're looking for potential importers or authorities for labeling and standards too.
I have to say that me personally, and certainly from my company, we do check the USME Center as a source of information constantly. So they have very nice publications, really well designed to do exactly what you need let's say on an entry level. Other organizations do have a lot of questions and other publications for experts, but most of us, we just want to start exporting to the country, okay? Let's get to see some more questions because there is a lot of them. Are there specific regulations on organic products? Yes, there are. Actually, the European brand or the European brand for organic products is not accepted in China, so you cannot actually label it as organic. You have to be very careful. A few cases reported on bottles being removed. This case was olive oil. These two cases were olive oil. Removed from the shelves because they say organic. Not common, but it may happen. You can get the organic label from China, but you will have to ask for an individual request, and you will have to pay the trip of the inspector whenever he has time to go to your home country, just to check if you can really qualify in China as organic, okay? Snack foods and dry fruit, most of them do not need a protocol. Most of them, but they need an agreement between, not a protocol does not mean you don't need an agreement, it's like dairy. You need an agreement between your countries. What China normally does is as follows. If your country does export a lot of this dry food, they will say, okay. If they export very little, they will ignore you pretty much. For example, in Spain, almonds, that there is a lot of almonds exporting from Spain, they will agree. If you go for a different one, let's say chestnuts, I'm afraid the Chinese will ignore you and go to the main supplier of chestnuts, okay? Again, specific questions with the products, please send them to us and we will check it. Now, is there a specific importing license for cured meat like Iberian ham, or the same license applies for all kinds of meat? For importing, is the same license. For importing, the importer point of view, we're going to go to the exporter point of view next. From the importer point of view, it's the same license, but it's very complicated to obtain, I have to say. And for me, every operation of import needs a specific paperwork and approval, so it's very complicated. Now, if you are the exporter, what should you do? Now, if your Iberian ham probably means you're from Spain. If you're from Spain, you have to have been visited by the Chinese authorities. Only 17 companies have so far, 2008 and 2010. If you are not among the list, you have to wait until they go again and visit you. What can you do? You can get in contact with the ministry in Spain and request to be added in the list, from which the Chinese authorities will pick the visits next time they go. It may take some time, I have to be honest. I need to register a new label for every wine every year. Is that because the bottling date changes? Well, the problem that we have here is it has changed in the last 8 months. So before there was a different regulation. I don't think that you will have to change every year. You will have to submit the label, but they will say it's okay. You probably did in the last few months because they changed the regulation. But yes, if you indicate any change in your label, you have to submit it again. Explain it's just a year and it will be no problem, but it will be a small cost.
So I think we have time for one final question, Pablo. We're running out of time, I'm afraid. Many questions coming through. If we haven't covered your question, please do send it to us via the inquiries@eusmecenter.org.cn address, or visit the website and click the Ask the Expert button.
All right, so one very interesting question. We've exported to China before, but we've changed our importer, or we have two also, very possible. And do we have to change the label again? Do we have to go through the process again? I'm afraid so. The label is being a very complicated and delicate issue. Most of the questions and work that we can get from importing wine at the moment or foodstuffs is certainly the labeling. At the end, my experience is a matter of time and money. It's kind of a technical barrier that is being raised in China recently. Pretty much for everything you will have to change your label and go through the process again. And I'm afraid this is the situation at the moment. It may get better in the future, but this is what we have right now.
Thank you very much, Pablo. I think we've dealt with some really interesting topics, very practical aspects of how to get your food and beverage products into China, looking at the standards, the way that they work in China, where you can get the information on standards, how the labeling process works, what are some of the practical or best practices that you can share in order to have a smoother run through customs with your products. I'm sure that there will be many follow-up questions, so as I said, please do send those through the inquiries at eusmecenter.org.cn or via our website. So just to finish off, there are a couple more minutes. I encourage you all today to stay connected with the USME Center. Each month we are sending through a monthly newsletter via all our registered users. So if you haven't yet registered on the website, I encourage you to do so. A lot of useful information in these newsletters, industry updates, latest facts and figures on opportunities in specific sectors in the Chinese market for you, and obviously some news also on our social media of upcoming events in your area. Specifically to food and beverage, I remind you that we have a food and beverage sector report as well as a wine sector report available from our Knowledge Center to download. I mentioned the technical guidelines for labeling for food and beverage products earlier, and we also have 2 infographics online which show the processes step by step in an easy graphic of how to get your wine or your olive oil from Europe to the customer in China. So just to finish off, for those of you that are based in China, an early happy October holiday. We will be closing in the USME Center just for a few days during the first week of October for the national holidays here. Our next webinar will be scheduled on October the 15th, and we'll look at construction. So do stay posted on email, and we will send through to you the upcoming webinar invitations. So as you log off today, I also remind you that there'll be a very short survey. It will just take a few seconds to complete, and I welcome you all to finish that up. So I'd just like to take this moment to thank Pablo and also to thank you for all your interesting questions today, and we look forward to following up with any information that you may require in this regard. Thank you very much.